The Speaker's gallery this morning are the family of the Honourable Bette Stephenson and members of the former Parliamentarian Association here today for the Association's AGM and tribute. Welcome back to Queen's Park. I look to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you seek it, I'm sure you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That the House provides unanimous consent to pay tribute to Bette Stephenson, first elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 1975. This House would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the former Cabinet Minister on the occasion of her receiving the Distinguished Service Award conferred by the Ontario Association of Former Parliamentarians, and that up to 5 minutes be allotted to each of the recognized parties and up to 5 minutes be divided among independent members.
Mr. Calandra is seeking the unanimous consent of the House to pay tribute to Bette Stephenson, first elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 1975. This House would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the former Cabinet Minister on the occasion of her receiving the Distinguished Service Award conferred by the Ontario Association of Former Parliamentarians, and that up to 5 minutes be allotted to each of the recognized parties and up to 5 minutes to be divided amongst the independent members. Agreed? Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. Should we do the introduction or go back? No, we'll go back to introduction of visitors afterwards. Who's leading off? Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable colleagues, I rise in this chamber to recognize a trailblazer among us. The late Bette Stephenson was Ontario's first female Minister of Education. In this role, she left a legacy, and she led the way in establishing special education in this province. Dr. Stephenson served the people of Ontario in several other cabinet roles, including as Deputy Premier. She was the province's first female Minister of Labour. She was the first female Minister of Education, the first female Minister of Colleges and Universities, the first female Minister of Finance. Now, before entering politics, Dr. Stephenson, a medical doctor who was accepted into the University of Toronto's program a year before she was eligible, also became the first female president of the Ontario Medical Association. Dr. Stephenson was a strong advocate for her constituents in North York, for women, and for plain sense, common sense. Dr. Stephenson dedicated her life to the service of others and achieved so much in public service. That is why we will soon dedicate a fitting and permanent space to honour her legacy for the ages. In the company of her family, we celebrate her memory and her legacy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Toronto St. Paul's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with deep appreciation that I rise in the Legislature this morning as a member of the NDP, Ontario's official opposition, and as both the culture and women's issues critic to pay homage to the late Honourable Dr. Bette Stephenson, who dutifully served during the Honourable Premiers Bill Davis and Frank Miller governments as a PC MPP for the then riding of York Mills from 1975 to 87. Dr. Stephenson also served as the second Deputy Premier of Ontario from May 17, 85 to June 26, 1985, while Treasurer and Chair of the Management Board of Cabinet. Dr. Stephenson's sunrise was on July 13, 1924 in Aurora, and her sunset August 19, 2019 in Richmond Hill, but her flame will never be extinguished. Today we are joined by Dr. Stephenson's loved ones, her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and I am certain your lives have continued to be indelibly marked and inspired by the trailblazing legacy of commitment, dedication, and forthrightfulness of your beloved family matriarch. I welcome you all to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. October is Women's History Month, and while my 5 minutes cannot begin to paint the entire canvas that was Dr. Stephenson's illustrious trajectory in politics and medicine, she amassed a number of historical leadership firsts that in their time shook the foundation of a patriarchal culture and can never be overstated enough in their significance for today's aspiring and current girl and women achievers. Dr. Stephenson, as you heard, would be named the first woman Minister of Labour, the first woman Minister of Education, the first woman Minister of Colleges and Universities in Ontario, the first woman Minister of Finance, the first Chief of the Department of Family Medicine at Women's College Hospital, the first woman president of the Ontario Medical Association in the early 1960s, and the first woman president of the Canadian Medical Association, the highest honour Canadians can bestow on one of their own. Dr. Stephenson was invested into the Order of Canada, later named to the Order of Ontario, and honoured with the Queen's Golden and Diamond Jubilee medals. She was also inducted into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. From her honorary doctorates, her many chairpersonships, her memoir, a short book about a long life, to her even calling out Pierre Trudeau, Justice Minister at the time, in the early 60s, for agreeing to her that he decriminalize abortion by removing it from the criminal code, but not following through on his word. I hope we, especially the young women listening today, walk away motivated by her strongest skill set, persistence and determination. I never knew Dr. Stephenson, and we most certainly would have had political, ideological differences, but as a wise person once told me, politicians may not agree on the how all the time, the way we govern, but if we can respect the commonality of our why, the reason we are here, the pursuit of a greater good, we can at the very least see the humanity in each other, and we can use politics for the good of all, not for the privileged few. Dr. Stephenson's sheer persistence, determination, and her straight talk to even the Premier of the day was no surprise. After all, she told her parents at 5 or 8 years of age she'd be a doctor, and after all, that's what she became. And when folks said there were no women doctors, she said, yes, there are. I don't know any, but I know there'll be. As Dr. Stephenson said in her later years, it was clear to me that persistence paid off when the cause was worthy. Her life and legacy are unapologetically worthy, and as I stand here as a Black queer woman, the first to sit in the Legislature, I promise you that the cause of all girls and women's liberation, advocating for their access to education, free of debt, a just legal system, job pay equity and safety, affordable childcare, real affordable housing options, fully funded rape crisis and sexual assault centres, real legal aid for women and their families fleeing violence, health justice, and a provincial gender equity strategy are all causes that are worthy, and in the spirit of Dr. Bette Stephenson, we must all advocate these causes and more with vigilance and persistence. So to my fellow colleagues in the House, especially those across the aisle, dear hearts, as Dr. Bette Stephenson might have said, I hope you all join me. Thank you very much, and a round of applause to Bette Stephenson's loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the member for Ottawa South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's an honour on behalf of my colleagues in the Liberal Party to say a few words of tribute to Dr. Bette Stephenson, an incredible public servant and, by all accounts, an incredible person. I'd like to acknowledge that her family is here and simply say that your mother, grandmother, and great-grandma was a force of nature. After reading her long list of accomplishments, I have come to the conclusion that the word obstacle did not appear in her dictionary. Although I'm sure that for her, the lists of her firsts were far less important than the lists of things that she accomplished for people. Here in this legislature, for things like improving worker health and safety, reforming the education system and making special education a more prominent role in that. Those are a few of her enduring legacy. She knew where she had to get to. She got there, and that was good for people. She was a trailblazer for women in medicine, in politics, and in public life. So she was once asked if she was a feminist, and she answered, "I'm a humanist. I believe the most qualified person should get the job, and if that means some men are left behind, so be it." So I like to go through Hansard and read people's Hansard, and so I'm going to put this in context because she got elected in 1975, became the Minister of Labour a month later. And so we all know when we first get elected here, even if you've been around, the first 6 months you're still trying to find the washrooms, right? You're trying to figure out where everything is, you're getting your feet settled. But here's her response to repeated opposition attacks. Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely flattered that the opposition has taken the trouble to research so many of my old speeches in various other roles. I think that it is an honour not normally accorded to a freshman member of this House. So, what a graceful answer, and I think that probably typifies Oliver Hansard. Minister of Labour, 1975, lots of labour strife, anti-inflation work going on, not an easy job. All this, and she had 6 children and a family as well. So we all know how hard our jobs are in this legislature, on our families, what we ask them to do so we can do the things that we have to do on behalf of people. So I just want to finish by saying thank you to her family. Thank you for sharing her with us, sharing her with Ontarians, and supporting her and all the things that she did to make our province better. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Next, we have the member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise today to pay tribute to Dr. Bette Stephenson on behalf of the Green Party of Ontario. I welcome her many family and friends and loved ones to Queen's Park today. Undoubtedly, you are proud of Dr. Stephenson's many contributions to medicine, politics, and public service. Dr. Stephenson was a trailblazer par excellence. Recently, I had the opportunity to have a meeting in the boardroom of the Ministry of Education, where there are pictures of all the past ministers lined on the wall. And as you would expect, for decades, man after man after man, until there was Dr. Stephenson on the wall. But I was not struck so much by her being the trailblazer in the first, but by how many women ministers had followed her since, and how many openings of doors she had created over her distinguished career. I would argue that Dr. Stephenson has blazed more trails for women, perhaps, than any woman in this province's history. And I believe her first bear repeating. The first woman minister of colleges and universities, the first woman minister of finance, the first woman minister of labour, the first woman president of the Ontario Medical Association, the first woman president of the Canadian Medical Association. Her remarkable legacy includes being an officer of the Order of Canada, receiving the Order of Ontario, and being inducted into the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. And today I want to recognize her legacy, that her contributions didn't stop at her retirement. It included being receiving the Ontario Association of Former Parliamentarians Distinguished Service Award. So I'm grateful for the many doors that Dr. Stephenson opened, and I thank her and her family for her many contributions to our province and our country.
Thank you very much.